Welcome everyone. My name is Nayu and I am a research fellow for disabilities at Ebase, and I am happy to be your moderator here today. For the past 3 days, we have been looking at different perspectives for disseminating research findings. We have had interesting discussions throughout the past 3 days, and we are wrapping up today, day 3. We know that some of us are just joining today. We're happy to have you today. We know that some have been there for the past 3 days. We trust that we have had interesting discussions and we have learned a lot during the past 3 days. So today is the last day of the Institute. We hope that we will finally, or we will have a very interactive session and it's going to end well. So I'm just going to give this opportunity for 3 persons to quickly introduce themselves. If you don't mind, you just turn on your camera, or you can just say your name, where you're joining us from, and what you do or your institution.
Sure. Okay, my name is Mohamedou Abubakar. I'm joining right now from Bamenda, Cameroon, and I am a master's student studying linguistics in the University of Bamenda, and I am an assistant research fellow for the PIRL project. Thank you so
We're happy
much.
to have you. We're happy to
so
have you here today, Mohamedou. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any other person? Yes, Constance, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. My name is Njumanu Constance. I'm team lead at Global Action for Community Development.
Okay, we're happy to have you here, Constance. All right, so today we're going to be looking at disseminating knowledge through community and theater approaches. We want to learn from collaborations from Ebase Africa and La Liberté Arts Group. Ebase is a renowned research organization who are also very active in disseminating research findings, and La Liberté is a great organization that is doing a lot of dissemination through theater, storytelling, and arts. So we have so many speakers that are joining us today. We are hoping that we will learn from their collaborations. We will be able to know how we can use different approaches, including community theater, to disseminate research findings. So I'm just going to call on Akumbu to do his presentation. So Akumbu is the founding father of La Liberté Arts Group. He is an award-winning poet and storyteller. He has a vast knowledge in doing short films and communicating findings to the community using theater. So Akumbu, you're welcome and you have the floor. Thank you.
Good day.
Good day, Akumbu.
Yeah, my name is Akumbu Jones. I'm presently in Chico is Southwest, but I'm resident in Bamenda. So I'm the director of La Liberté Arts Group. I'm into theater and film. Yep. So basically, I'm here with the veteran actor, Mr. Vuga Samson. Some of you might know him. So he will be accompanying me. So basically, what is theater for development? Theater for development is, first, let's start with what is theater, first of all. So what is theater? Theater is a form of art that is made up of actors, that is set up by actors and a director and a writer. And then it's a live performance where you have audience and you have the actors. Classic theater would detect that you have actors on stage and then you have audience sitting down and watching. But theater for development simply means that it's a melange of the audience and the actor. So the line between an audience member and that of the actor is really thin. It's not even there because they are all intertwined. So basically, that is what theater for development is. So I will allow Mr. Buka Samson to continue the presentation here.
Well, good afternoon to all those who are involved. I want to add that theater is a changeable, continuous process of development via theater and creative forms of expression. I'm talking about theater for development. It is a cultural action for change. Cultural action is an intervention in reality by cultural means. It is one tool in which the wider development process is achieved. Community engagement approach to rural development. That's what I would say theater for development is.
Okay, so under theater for development, you have two basic, so you have theater for development, like what Grandpa has said, and in under theater for development, what happens is the research is done by a group of researchers. So they go to a community and they carry a research about a topical issue within that community, and then they bring it back, and then they have a conference of script writers where they write stories based on that topical issue that is in that community. That is theater for development. On the other hand, you have, so we should also look at the principles that guide theater for development.
The principles that guide theater for development. Theater for development is built on the principle of integratory participatory communication, IPC, which, according to one school of thought, it involves the local community identifying a development problem in the community, a common goal, and discovering its varied dimensions.
So, like we were talking about theater for development. So now the other form is forum theater. Forum theater, the difference between forum theater and theater for development is this: they are all development oriented. But with theater for development, you have a group of researchers going to the community, identifying issues in that community, and then come back to write stories about this, right? This is theater for development. But forum theater, rather, on the other hand, there is no disjoint between the community and the research. The research is done while the theater is ongoing. So in this sense, what happens with theater for forum theater or theater of the oppressed, as the founder of theater of the oppressed, Augusto Bo, calls it, is that you can carry out your research while the play is ongoing. The play is not going to, you are not going to carry your research before and then before have the performance. You're going to have your performance while the research is going on. So the actors and the researchers work in tandem while the performance is ongoing, unlike theater for development. Maybe Grandpa has something to add to this.
For theater for development, it mobilizes the community to take action. And in theater of the oppressed, you take action beyond the stage. The audience, they are also involved in the action. They don't only watch, but they watch and can participate in the performance on stage. But with community theater for development, the community is also involved. The community is also involved, so it can help them. It can help to support them in the process of social and political change. Theater for development.
Okay, so it's very important because we are talking to researchers. So it's important to mention that why in theater for development, you first of all carry your research on topical issues within that community, then you write your script, then you perform the script. You get? But with forum theater, you actually carry your research, so you work with a team of researchers where they are with you as they are developing the story, and the research is ongoing simultaneously. So it's not like you're going to have, so it's not going to be separate where you have researchers carry out research, then before they come to perform it. You get what I mean? So as I was saying that for theater for development, what happens is you have a group of researchers, they go to a community, stay in that community, identify issues in that community with the community, then they take these issues, come back, write stories about them, then go back to the community and they perform with the community. This is theater for development. But on the other hand, forum theater, you have a group of actors and researchers working together in a community, staying in the community, writing, first of all, researching and writing the story at the same time with the input of the community. So the research is ongoing and the performance is ongoing at the same time. Yes, there might be a difficulty in that you might have a lot of data, but as researchers, you need a lot of data. So you'll be able to carry all you need to get every sort of data that you can get. Now let's move to the next part of our conversation. We're going to look at the importance or why theater for development is important. For theater for development to be very important for a community, the first thing is that it breaks the dictatorial or the top-bottom approach, in that theater you have the actors acting while the audience are watching. You get? So theater for development is very democratic in the sense that it helps to bridge the gap between those who need the information and those who are informing. So the gap between these two people is broken and they can all be as one person. So it's a very democratic form of art in that you don't have anybody like a leader and you don't have anybody like a subject. You have people who are learning and educating and entertaining themselves at the same time. This is one of the most important parts of theater for development. It is very democratic. Why this form of theater is also important? So why theater for development is also very important is that it helps to subtly use entertainment to educate and to carry out research in a very, very subtle but very engaging manner. Unlike other forms of research where you have to carry bogus questionnaires and stuff like that, you create a situation where it is very relaxed. You create an environment where people who feel like they belong, their voice do matter. They don't need to have PhDs to inform a question about their community. So this process of allowing people to be involved in the process of carrying out the research, in the process of doing community development is what I feel theater for development or forum theater brings to the table. And that will be the end from our end. So, ciao.
Wow, I'm happy to be part of this.
Thank you so much, Akumbu and Grandpa, as you called. Thank you so much for your presentation about theater. Yes, using community theater to share knowledge to the community. So the next on our agenda, we're going to have someone from Ebase share with us how they use storytelling to disseminate research findings. Just to remind us that we have some persons here who have difficulties hearing when you speak so fast. So we are encouraging that you speak slowly so that the live transcript can pick up your voice, so that even those who are using screen readers will be able to read what you are saying clearly. So thank you. Do we have anyone from Ebase who wants to share how Ebase use storytelling to broker knowledge to the communities or share research findings to the public? Sophie, are you there?
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Boni Penka Sophie, a storyteller at Ebase Africa and also a research fellow at Ebase Africa. So I'll be talking on how we use knowledge translation at Ebase Africa to communicate research evidence. But before then, I would like to really explain why we think storytelling can be an effective tool for knowledge brokering in the African context. So I think over time it's been observed that there's kind of like an evidence practice gap that has been characterized by the complexity of research evidence, because the terminology in which scientific research evidence, the form in which it is being communicated, is often very complex for local communities to digest them. So we think that to bridge this gap, evidence brokering innovations have been developed to contextualize research evidence into a more accessible and communicable tool. So one of the initiatives that has been kind of like very effective in Ebase Africa has been using storytelling to communicate research evidence to non-literate community. So the way we do it at Ebase is we first of all have the researchers who do the research, who carry out the searches, and when they carry out the searches, they synthesize the finding and they develop
research.
Hello.
You can hear.
Okay, yeah. So what I was saying is what we do at Ebase is first the researchers kind of like carry out the searches, they synthesize the finding and actually develop a brief summary for the artist. But before then, they equally go on in the various communities using the trans-theoretical model of change to identify the various stages of change of the different communities. Why do we do this? Because we actually, when we started enrolling the storytelling, the evidence story day intervention, we realized that some communities, some stories that we gave out to the communities did not actually match the various level of change at which these various communities were. So at times we bring stories that just I'll take an example of the case we went in Lendi to share stories on using mosquito bed nets. So the community there started saying, we already know that we have to use mosquito bed nets. So at that point in time, we understood that they were already at the level that their stage of change was at the level of acceptance. So that is why we think using the trans-theoretical model of change is equally very important in getting research evidence to the communities. At Ebase, we equally understood the importance of considering the various stages of change of each community. So after identifying these various stages of change, we then come and work with professional storytellers, where we develop a technical file in which we have a summary, a research evidence summary, message for the artist, and there we equally have the different stages of change of the communities that we have been able to identify. So these messages are given out to the storytellers who develop stories. And later on, we go in the various communities where we work with the local storytellers in that community to communicate the research evidence into the local languages to ensure that it is contextually relevant. So briefly, that is what we do at Ebase to communicate research evidence to local communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Penka, for that brief and great presentation on how Ebase does storytelling. So my understanding is that when you want to tell the story in the African context, you choose the topic and you do the research on the topic. Then you also go and carry out some research in the community to know what level they are before you start sharing your story to them. This is very interesting, and it's quite related to the theater at which Akumbu just shared, sharing why you have audience and you have the speaker on stage sharing to the audience. Thank you very much for those great presentations. So the next on the agenda we're going to play a short video clip, an example of storytelling or sharing knowledge to the community by Ebase Africa. So please, we are hoping that you enjoy the video. Leslie will just share it, and we're going to enjoy it together. So go ahead.
Please let me know if the sound is okay once I start playing it.
Okay. Yeah, it's good.
Just like they were a part of me, hoping to watch them grow in the things I teach, reading letters, understanding figures, counting numbers and more. I've made sure my lessons were in melodies with no lyrics at all. I'd be the oceans pitting wisdom on the shore. Teaching wasn't enough, making sure they understand what was taught was the fundamental thing. Because I'd love my students like they were a part of me, hoping to watch them grow in the things I teach. Evaluating their progress, the solution, assignments, exams, after explanation. Planting wasn't enough, I'd water the seed to watch it grow. And if they failed, I'd do it 1,000 times again and again. I mean, if they failed, I'd do it 1,000 times again and more. That's how I watch them step to the next level, because I love my students like they were a part of me, hoping to watch them grow in the things I teach. Evaluating their progress, the fundamental solution, assignments, exams, after explanation. Thanks.
I will kill you! You're hearing now? I will kill you! I will kill you in this house today! I will just finish your life! They begin to give me high blood, give me my blood pressure. I will kill her! Why won't you begin? He begin so. He might begin so no get no one eye sense for school. You want? Actually, wait. Why you no get sense? You see time when you come out of school. Look time. Normal picking they don't come back. Hell, that mommy never ask. See time when you come out of school. Why? Our teacher bed to put near my classmates.
Thank God.
Now the new one that day. And the new one that every day. Teacher paid every day for the ass. So man of your rest, he use that one to walk up and down. Man of your rest for the ass. The teacher paid us to pay us.
They don't have group study. They don't have group study. No, they don't have together. Yeah, so they still study them.
Group study, we begin of even get. Oh, I'm not doing the ass. I'm 11.5 or 20. Now all that's it. What?
They really try no. 11.5. Now every man. If you want to see so in that group study, they help you so for the past again 11.5. So now pass mark.
Oh, that beginning they get 20 on 20. So they now wish. They chop now wish.
I'm not helping.
You also.
So how you will talk that kind of talk? You need to try so you lead the actual time. You know what I'm saying? Come back collaboration. When they put about 20, you talk to so.
I beg. Hey, you just bring big grammar, you broke my head.
Sorry. I don't focus on you understand that big grammar. Mommy, Amina, come back collaboration. That's what organization, very, very big for my country. Where they make study on how we teach begin fine.
Okay.
For book work, for your help, you know, sickness. Then they do study then. Gather them plenty for how to make sure you follow appropriately. And one of the study they don't move at all. That's why I said, no, I'm not school. So when you go put some people, you don't get sense. I want to get sense more. Why we get sense for average? Why we get that over? Why we don't get that at all? We don't enjoy them together. I mean, in the video. That's should make I'm not going fast. You want to see next year 11.5, 20 on 20, 21 on 20.
Hey, Marina!
I'm telling you.
Okay, I'm not gonna You don't say that Ebase and wait again.
No. I just say, so you work for that place where they do research, gather evidence, effective basis.
Okay, now so you know it.
I don't want
I don't want that.
I tell you.
Okay.
Don't kill them again.
So I'm gonna go get
No, you
pass.
But don't beat them again.
I don't beat that.
You don't want me to begin. They don't learn now.
I don't learn.
Study group is important.
I don't learn.
Okay, mommy, I'm done.
But if the Amina, I go really go study group.
Yeah.
But if he come back late for the house, I go kill him.
No, don't kill him.
No, I go kill him. If he come back late, he get to come back early. I go leave it. No, hey, I want to be Amina. I want to
go pray. You know, okay, bye now.
All right, so thank you.
Thank you very much for playing that short video. That is a video where Ebase disseminates research evidence. I think that we're talking about the study group. The storytellers know better. So they were disseminating the evidence both to the parents and even people in the community. So I'm going to give the floor to all of us so that we can share our thoughts on what we have learned so far from the video, from Akumbu's presentation, from Penka's presentation, like that, so that we have the discussion interactive. So I'm just going to give the floor. You can raise your hand. You can unmute yourself and just go ahead if you want to. So has anyone shared a story or disseminated their research findings through storytelling or through theater before?
Hi, Nine.
Hi, Mohammedu. Just go ahead.
All right, thank you. Yeah, actually, I've not, but the presentations have inspired me a lot, and I think I've got a new perspective on how one can disseminate one's research findings with relative ease, because the presenters, as I've seen, have navigated a range of topics and a range of opportunities that are available for us. So I've not, but I think I am looking forward to that.
Okay, thank you, Mohammedu. Is there any other person who has been involved in sharing, or you may want to share with us how you also disseminate your research findings? Do you use storytelling or you use other approaches? Or what are your thoughts about this method of disseminating research to the community? Mary Ann, do you want to say something? Just go ahead.
Greetings, everyone. I think that the storytelling approach is very effective, especially as most of the research evidence is always being presented in complicated language, as Penka said. And so when we use storytelling, it helps to boost the understanding of practitioners, policymakers, and citizens, especially the underserved who are not even knowledgeable. They don't have any knowledge about it.
Thank you very much, Mary Ann. Yes, I think using theater arts or storytelling to disseminate research findings, which is usually very complex, is a great idea, since most people, even policymakers, do not have the capacity to understand research jargon. So acting it and having audience or telling it through stories or songs will help to communicate the findings to your audience so that they can be able to engage in the information that you're trying to pass across. Because from my understanding, research is to improve on basic services or interventions. So to be able to make this happen, we need to find ways to get this evidence to the people who need to use it be the communities, policymakers, teachers, whoever is our audience at the point. So I think storytelling and theater is great. Yes, Grandpa, can you talk now?
I was talking about, a project that was carried out in partnership with Oxford University. It was a research project where we're using a theater of the oppressed and research to be able to talk about, things that have been happening, in our local communities in the northwest region of Cameroon. And it was the issue about confidentiality was very important. The people, we all agreed, before we started the program, we all agreed, whether the people were ready to do it, and we're sitting around table. And, the people knew that at any moment they felt, that they don't want to continue, they can step out. So the people's consent was very, very important. And we carried out with a group of youths, in different communities. And these youths were in the age range of 15 to 25 years. So it was quite enriching because they could express, their deep pain freely, because they knew that they were dealing, with people who are not going to disappoint them, like the authorities have been doing. So the project was titled the Peeling the Onion of Pain. So it was very, very effective because it reached a level where, they actually listened to their different stories. They told their different stories, and then they used different forms of foreign theater, to act out those stories, proposing wonderful solutions, and the researchers, they got a lot of information about what, the people in my region, the Northwest region, our region, the Northwest region of Cameroon, and the local communities are going through in this time of difficulty. So it was very effective.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts, Grandpa. We appreciate. Constance, your hand is raised. You can just go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much, Nine, and thank you to Sophie and Akumbo for that wonderful presentation. So I want to ask, there are a lot of advantages around storytelling in decision making and policy, all that. I want to ask, what are the possible challenges with this method? What are some of the unforeseen challenges that maybe someone is just getting into storytelling? What are the challenges that we are bound to face, or some of the shortcomings in using storytelling? Thank you.
Okay, let me just jump in on that question, Constance. That has been programmed for hour 3 of this our session, so that we don't get to take so much time because we are almost getting to our break. So during hour 3, the challenges in using theater or storytelling are going to be addressed, and I do hope that we are going to remember your question. Is that okay?
All right, thank you very much. That's fine.
Okay. Yes,
Hi,
Muhammad.
Nine.
Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, please, I just want to make a few comments about the second presenter and finally with the video clip. And I can start with the video clip. I think the language was contextually apt to the audience because it was brought to the level of the audience, and it was a type of language that the audience understands better. And the initiative of translating or transcribing it was wonderful. However, I don't know if the grammar or the language could be a little bit better or clearer, because I don't know, irrespective of the fact that it is being addressed or it is being done by a people in a particular context, but many other people, probably native speakers and others, get in contact with it and they get to see it. So they may not understand the pidgin English or the Creole, but they can understand what is transcribed. However, if the transcription is not really clear enough, they may face difficulties, and that can exclude them from from that particular theater, since we are dealing generally or basically here with disability inclusive development. And the second presenter mentioned trans-theoretical model of change. I don't know if maybe she could throw more light on that or unpack the concept a little bit for someone like me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mohamedou, for your comments. We have 2 minutes to go for a short break. Then when we return, we are going to have Penka throw more light on the trans-theoretical model which she mentioned. It's going to be happening in the second hour. So if we had if Bongne Penka can address, I think, your first concern on the translating or communicating evidence to different communities using different languages, or considering our context of inclusive or of inclusiveness, maybe that would be great. We have 1 minute. Can we do that in 1 minute, Penka? Or we can come back
All right.
after the break.
Yes, so what I want to say is, yeah, that's a great point, and that is actually what we are working on now, ensuring that that is actually the idea, working with various local storytellers in various communities who will be able to translate the research evidence, maybe to contextualize the research evidence in their own local languages. It's still a process. It's still a process. So we hope with time we're going to get there where various communities, depending on their context, depending on considering their languages, will be able to have storytellers within those communities, or maybe trained storytellers within the communities who will be able to translate, to contextually translate research evidence using storytelling, and equally taking into consideration people with disability and all that. Is still a process. So we hope with time we are going to really take into consideration the context of our audience, the context of our population. I don't know if that answers your question.
Oh, yes, it does. Thank you so much for that clarification. It's great.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for your reaction. So my understanding is that if you go to a Francophone setting, you need to tell the stories in a language understood by people speaking French. If you go to a community where they speak only their native language, you need to communicate in their native. If you go to where you have audience, including people with disability, you need to find ways to communicate in such a language that they will be able to understand. Is that?
Yes, thanks for briefing it. Yeah, that's actually the idea.
Okay, so we are just going to have a short break for 10 minutes, and we're going to be returning at the top of the hour. That's 3 p.m. if you are attending from Cameroon or West African time, and we are going to continue with our session. All right, this is if you have decided that this is how you want to disseminate your research findings. Maybe you're doing research in school, maybe research as a project, and you have your findings that you want to share. Whoever your audience is, be policymakers, community members, whoever, you're going to talk about that in our different breakout rooms. So if you finally decide that you want to use community theater and storytelling to disseminate your findings, how do you get started? So we're going to be getting those details from Penka Martha, getting it from a researcher's perspective. How, what are the things to take into consideration to get started? Okay. So, Penka, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. All right, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you. So I'll be talking on community theater collaboration from the researcher's perspective, how researchers collaborate with storytellers to ensure that scientific research evidence is communicated through community theater collaboration. So the outlines of the work, I will have to talk about community theater collaboration. I'll be talking up on how is community theater collaboration done at Ebase, how do we do it at Ebase, and I'll equally raise out some key points to consider in community theater collaboration. So talking of community theater collaboration, if we are talking of community theater collaboration, what is community theater collaboration? So it is theater that is either made entirely by the community members, or it's a theater that is done with a collaboration between community members and professional artists, or it's equally performances that are solely made by professionals addressed to a particular community. So community theater collaboration is a valuable piece in enhancing the uptake of research, evidence, and development of the African community because it strengthens community involvement and contribution. It equally builds trust as the people who will actually be getting involved in transmitting the scientific research evidence will actually be community members, people from the community that interact every day with the community members. And equally, it helps enhance the uptake of scientific research evidence, as I earlier spoke of the practice gap that exists between research and practice by end users. So we see that looking at the African community, most often scientific research evidence is in the terminology that is very difficult to be understood by local communities. So through community theater collaboration, it can actually bridge the gap by ensuring that research evidence is communicated in a language that is easily understood and accessible by local community members. So it's equally it's very important and valuable within the African community as it helps preserve culture, because storytelling is actually part of the African culture. So if we are talking about the African-led approach in research evidence, we have to consider storytelling as one of these African-led approach that can really help in ensuring that scientific research evidence is communicated to the African community. How community, sorry, a minute. How community theater collaboration is done at Ebase. So what we do at Ebase is that researchers choose a topic on which they are going to tell the stories. The researchers go about finding, searching the scientific evidence, synthesizing the evidence, and equally identify the various stages of change in the different community following the trans-theoretical model of behavior change. I will just take this opportunity to clearly define or maybe throw more light on the trans-theoretical model of change, because someone actually asked that question. So when we talk about the trans-theoretical model of change, of behavior change, that's to do with the various stages of change in which each community is. So we have a pre-contemplation where we are unaware of the behavior or need for change. The population are not planning for change. So we have contemplation. Here, the community members are actually thinking about change, seeking out support and information. We equally have preparation. Here, they are planning to make change. We equally have action. So here, the community is already taking positive steps to make change and putting plans into practice. And we have maintenance. Here, this is where the population are now taking actions and actually achieving results, and we can actually see change in their behavior. and it's actually becoming part of their daily life. So these are the various stages of change of different communities. So the scientist actually goes in these different communities and try to identify the various level of changes in which this community found themselves. These are done most often through interviews, questionnaires to know. Probably, let me just take an example. SGBV, what do you think about a woman who may be a man who violates his wife, saying that she's my wife, so whenever I ask sex, she has to give it to me? So someone would say, I think it's bad. Someone would say, if she's your wife, you just have to give in, and stuff like that. So these are the various theories of change that we have been able to identify, and following that, we can see what kind of stories the storytellers can give to the population. So after identifying that, the researchers actually developed technical files, and these technical files are made of evidence statement, message for artists, the identified stage of change of the communities, and the technical file is equally made of the stories. Yeah. After the artist develop the story, that later on is included in the technical file. So after that, we organize meeting with professional, before it's included, we organize meeting with professional storytellers to share the evidence statement. So after the researchers have done all that scientific work, they now have a meeting with the professional storytellers where they share the evidence statement in a very simple language that will be understood by the storytellers. So once it's shared to the professional storyteller, researchers, and professional storytellers, then go to the various community where they work with the local community storytellers to ensure that the stories that they have developed is actually contextualized into local languages. And also they ensure that the story to equally build the capacities of local storytellers. So why is it that researchers and professional storytellers work together in these communities? This just to the researchers are there to ensure that the message is actually conveyed in the various stories. The message they're trying to communicate is actually conveyed in these various stories. So after that, we organize what we call our evidence story day, which is actually our way of doing community theater arts in with our own initiative of storytelling of community theater art. We call it evidence story day. So when we organize that session, I think that's the end. Although we think with time we will be able to assess the effectiveness of the intervention, which will have to do with impact evaluation, where impact evaluators will actually later on go in those various communities to identify if actually the intervention of using storytelling was really effective. So key point to consider in community theater collaboration, we have stages of change of each community. Is very important to identify the various stages of change of the different communities to know exactly what kind of story is important at a given time and within each community. It's equally important to consider the language and culture of the community. You have to understand the different language of that community to know in what form you have to transmit your stories, in what form you have to perform your stories or communicate them. And you equally have to understand the culture of the community to know how your story will be appealing to them. You can't go probably in the north and maybe in your stories, you have girls who are dressed half naked, just taking that into consideration.
Okay, while we are hoping that Penka joins us back, so oops, I think she was already wrapping up on her presentation. So since I have it here, I'm just going to go through it for her. So she was at considering the language and culture of the community, which means you have to consider the culture. For example, some days may be that they don't do any activity, so you need to take that into consideration so that you don't do your storytelling or your theater on such day. You also check out the language. If the people communicate whatever language, you want to make sure that you're using that language so that they understand what you are saying. And you also consider this complexity in the evidence statement for the artist, so that the artist can be able to understand what you are saying and be able to develop their stories. Penka, if you do join us, please just take over and also ensure that the messages are effectively conveyed in the stories. So this is in her conclusion, I think she was going to say that community theater collaboration is very important in research and development in Africa, as it is contextually relevant. The African continent is known to uphold the culture of telling stories, because this is what we grew up with, telling stories from the fireside with the intention of learning lessons at the end of the day. And it's more effective in interventions to enhance equal access to evidence and increase uptake of research evidence, and it also promotes Africa evidence-led approaches. I think that this is because research evidence is usually made up of plenty of scientific jargons that cannot be easily understood or digested by the consumers of evidence. So it is important to convert these jargons into digestible formats. In the comments in the chat, so many people were saying they did not get the different stages of the trans-theoretical model of behavioral change, which Penka was talking about. I don't know, maybe Penka, when she joins us, we're going to continue. We will have her say it better so that we can understand better from her perspective. Okay, so at this point, the screen is freezing. So, but for the theory of change, I think that Penka was trying to let us know that you need to know whether your community is at the there is pre-contemplation stage, then there is contemplation, then they finally decide that they want to take up the intervention, then they take it up, then they change, and then the maintenance. I think it would be best to have her come and explain. But from the example which she mentioned that happened at Lendi, I think it gives a clearer view of it, saying that when they went to Lendi to do storytelling on sleeping under mosquito bed nets, they were trying to sensitize. The storytelling was to sensitize the population. The population was already aware that they need to sleep under bed nets. So they were asking them, we already know, so where are the bed nets? Where are the mosquito bed nets? That's why it's important to consider checking your community, which level of change they are before you continue with your storytelling. So at this point, we are going to have some breakout sessions, and when we go into our breakout rooms, we're going to be discussing we are going to have practical exercises where we are going to discuss on how to get started if we finally decide that we want to disseminate our findings to the public. We're going to choose the audience in our different breakout rooms, and when we do choose that, we should also take into consideration our context of disability. So we are going to be asking ourselves, where do I start from? What are the steps I should consider when telling my story? So you choose your audience and you take into consideration our context. You are going to be asking ourselves, how do I start? And we also highlight the different stages of change. I think Penka is trying to join back. Leslie is going to group us into our various different breakout rooms so that we can go there. Okay.
Penka, are you good to go? Are you all join in?
Hello, yeah, I'm here. Sorry, I had some internet issues.
Okay, Penka. I think we had some questions in the chat where people were asking you to please explain the trans-theoretical method which you mentioned. They did not get it clearly. They did not actually get what the different stages of the theory of change which you mentioned. And we're going to be discussing about that in our different breakout rooms. So if you can just go over that while Leslie is preparing us to go to our different breakout rooms, that would be great.
All right, so I was talking of the researchers equally have to consider the trans-theoretical model of change to be able to identify the various stages at which the different communities are finding themselves in. So I spoke of pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, maintenance as the different stages of change. So pre-contemplation is actually that point where the community is unaware of behavior, or maybe where the community is unaware of any need to change their behavior, so they do not know that they even have to change to make some changes in their behavior. When we talk about contemplation, so the communities are now contemplating if they are thinking of changing their behavior, if they actually have to change their behavior or not. So looking at preparation, so at this point in time, the community members are at that stage where they are preparing to change. So I talk of contemplation, where they are still thinking, they are still contemplating whether they should change their behavior or not. So preparation, they have made up their mind and they are now preparing to change their behavior. Action is the stage where they have taken the action, the positive step to make some changes, and they are actually putting plans into practice. So we see them actually taking the initiative through their actions to actually change their behavior. Maintenance is the stage where they are achieving results and we can actually see behavior change becoming a part of their daily life. So that's practically what I meant by researchers need to identify the various stages of change of the different communities to understand what is the story that will actually fit this particular context. So I don't know if that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Penka, for clarifying on that. So, Leslie, are we good for the breakout session?
Yes, the breakout rooms are ready to go, and you should be receiving a message right now asking you to get into your room, into a room. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being back. So we are just going to use this opportunity before the break to quickly debrief what we talked about during the breakout rooms. So I'll start by inviting Nine from her group to just share a bit of what they talked about. And after that, we'll hop into the break. So we have about 5 to 6 minutes of discussion and sharing.
Thank you, Leslie, and welcome back, everyone. Some people are still struggling to join again. We did have interesting discussion. Does anyone from a group want to share what we discussed?
Okay, hi Ellen, hi everybody. We had, yes, like Nine just said, we had really an interesting session where we were exploiting most of the things we discussed in relation to storytelling and theater of the oppressed. What caught my attention was when Akumbo explained theater of the oppressed, where the artist gets to co-create the story with community members. So it was quite unfortunate I had technical issues and I lost at some point during the discussion. So, but that's what I could capture from the discussion. Then we had our minds open up again in relation to the theory of change, awareness, contemplation, preparation, and action. So I think that's the little I could capture. I'm so sorry for the internet issues.
Okay, thank you. So we'll just move to the next group. Do you guys want to share what you discussed in your group before we go for a short break?
Yes. Hi, everyone. This is Mohamedou speaking, and I'm reporting for room 2, that is group 2, where we had an interesting conversation. That is Penka, Mbangsi Zitham, and myself. And we focused mostly on our experiences in research findings and disseminating research through storytelling and theater, in line to the topics of discussion of the previous presenters. And Mbangsi, she gave the various stages of research at Ebase, from the conceptualization process to the dissemination of information or the research findings. In fact, it was a plethora of so many exciting steps that she did explain to us, and that inspired us and made us see how to adapt that into our various research too. Then we spoke about the difficulties involved during the research process and research dissemination, specifically at Ebase and at individual levels. Then we spoke about the various research works that are being carried out presently by us and at Ebase, and how we plan to disseminate the findings at the end. So basically, that's what we discussed.
Okay, thank you so much, Mohamedou. We're happy that you guys had interesting discussions in your group. So right now we're just going to have like 5 minutes break, and we're going to return. 5 to 10 minutes, right, Leslie? And we'll return at the top of the hour. When we return, we're going to be talking about some of the challenges in doing storytelling or using theater to disseminate research findings. So please do come back. Enjoy your break. Okay, welcome back, everyone. We're happy to have you at this hour. So now we are going to be talking about some challenges. We understand that doing community theater or storytelling is quite complex and may entail some challenges. One of the challenges that we think most projects face is budgeting. So we're going to be looking at the money aspect when doing theater or storytelling. So we're going to be talking about how to construct a budget for a community theater project. We're going to look at principles to consider and what to remember to include. If there are surprises, how do we deal with it? We're going to be looking at surprises. We would love that Ebase share their experience if they have had any experiences, and Liberté is going to share if they have had any surprise experiences and how did they manage it, and how can others learn from their experience, and institutions that you don't have enough funds to fund your theater or your storytelling project. What do you do in such situations? What are the steps to consider in working with local storytellers in our community? So we are going to have that discussion within this third hour. So we are going to have the panel of Ebase and Liberté, and they're going to just give us their perspective, how they deal with the money issues. So do we have Akumbu there?
Yeah, Akumbu is here.
Okay, great. So do you want to share how you construct your budget or how you deal with money problems when you are doing community theater, what we can remember to include. Yeah.
Okay. Let me just reiterate something again. Again, when we talk of theater, community theater is a very broad word, which includes storytelling itself, which includes performance poetry. We have an event called Black Swagger Poetry Slam, which we have been doing for the past 6 years. That is performance poetry. So storytelling is a subset of theater itself. I thought that I should make that clear. Now, when we are talking about budgeting for community theater performance, the first thing is always the venue. The most important thing is the venue. Now, it is also important for us to share that, especially when you are talking with disabilities, you want to make sure that the venue is very accessible to disabilities. Most times, we just look for a good venue, in quote, that maybe 50 to 100 persons can get into. But most times, we don't take into consideration disabilities, especially, let's say, mobility. We don't look into that, and sometimes that is always a problem. So yeah, so the first thing, you want to budget for your hall, and to make sure that the hall is accessible to everybody. You don't want a hall that is like upstairs, that is going to be difficult for some person with mobility to find difficulties going up there and stuff like that. You also want to have a hall that has airspace that is not top. There's a lot of windows, but these windows should be this is west, right? Yes. That's where the sunlight comes from. The east, Vala. So you have to look at all of these community performance. However, if you want to use the African setting of, say, you want to use an African tree as a setting for a performance, you also want not to use it during rainy season, because the rain can fall, and then surprisingly rain is upon you.
Hi,
and you are having a performance.
You're breaking and we cannot hear you.
Oh.
Can you try again?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can
Hello?
hear you. Yes,
Hello?
we can hear you.
Okay, so I was sharing that if you want to have a venue that's outdoor, you of using starts, and then you will have difficulties to navigate to change the venue and stuff like this. So it's important to have it indoors. Now, another thing that you also want to make sure you put into your budget is costuming. You want to make sure that the costumes reflect the community where you're going to. It's not just because you have a good suit and then you take it to a community and you want to use that costume for a performance. You have to make sure that it ties with the cultural fashion of that community where you're finding yourself, and you make sure that the costume reflects that community. Another thing is the language, the diction that you're using in your play. If you are not a specialist in that language, you need to pay for a translator. You need to pay for someone to train your actors to be able to speak in that language or to write in that language. So, for instance, if you are going to a community, let's say you are going to Nso, for instance, in Nso or in Banso, they speak Lamso. So you don't want to go to a community and then you are speaking in English. And more to that, sometimes you say, okay, no, the lingua franca is pidgin, but I can assure you that the people will be more attuned to you if you're speaking in Lamso than in pidgin. So therefore, you have to put budget in. If you have to allocate budget for script translation, into Lamso, for instance, you don't assume that Pidgin is a better language. No, it depends. So this is very contextual. Depending, for instance, if you go to Nkwen, okay, Pidgin can work, but if you go to Lams, if you go to Banso, you go to those villages that are very strong with the tradition and culture, it's very much better to speak in their mother tongue. So you have to put a budget head for that. Another thing that you may also want to look at when you are considering in terms of your budget is the issue of transportation and transportation. The issue with transportation is researchers and actors have to move from the village often, like to and fro, to and fro, to and fro. So most times what I've discovered is that the budget head for transportation sometimes takes more money than say payment even for the actors. Just transportation alone is huge because you have to constantly move community members, you have to constantly move the actors, you have to constantly move the researchers. These three different group of persons, they have to be moving. So you spend a lot of money. You have to spend a lot of money on this. So in our experience, we have worked with three different organizations. We have actually worked with Ebase, we have actually worked with Oxford University, and we have worked with Toronto University. No. Yes, we have worked with Toronto University.
Just to let you know that you have 1 more minute to wrap up. Did you get that?
Okay.
Just reminding you that you have 1 more minute.
Yes, I just got you. Are we good?
Yes.
Okay, so Grandpa, I don't know if you have any other budget heads that you can add.
I think you've already exhausted your time. I'm just going to give Ebase the opportunity to also share their perspective. What would you do if you do not have enough funds for your project? What will you do? And have you had any surprise experiences you had to deal with because of money? So I'm giving the floor to anyone from Ebase. Bongne Penka, do you want to go ahead?
All right, thanks, Nine. I think given the fact that we are all talking about theater and generally it follows the same routine, so I think Akumbo has actually said a lot about budget. The only thing I might want to add is at the level of scaling out background noise, using theater or storytelling to communicate scientific research evidence. But it would probably be great if there was enough finance to scale it out in different sectors, in different communities, and using as much storytellers, local storytellers as possible. Not easy maybe to go in every community with hundreds of different languages and translate and expect probably few storytellers to communicate all those languages. So that budget should equally be set aside. This probably is a long-term goal for scaling out and training more local storytellers. So that's just what I will have to add what Akubu just said.
Okay, thank you very much for that addition. So Akumbu and Penka, have you guys had any surprises in the past that you had to deal with? Maybe you did not budget for something and you got into a situation where you were faced with a surprise. How did you manage it? Do you have anything to share? Akumbu, do you want to go ahead, or Penka? Any of you?
Okay, let me just share. One of the things that I've discovered is that sometimes persons. So, for instance, you say you want to. At the end of the day, you have 25 persons and you are budgeted for 20 persons, and so you have to pay for the extra 5 persons. Sometimes these are sometimes you foresee them, but you don't know the number of persons, especially when you are dealing with human sciences. Research with in human issues sometimes is complicated because you don't know how many persons are going to be there for the cases that I have been involved with. Either you have more persons or you have less. But you have more than you do not foresee this. Huh?
We cannot hear you.
Oh, okay. Hello?
Yes.
Okay. So I was just sharing that one of the difficulties is one of the unforeseen things is that sometimes you can budget for 20 persons. Like in a community, you budget to have 20 community members. At the end of the day, you have, say, 25. And in most of the communities that have involved or we have been working with, we tend to see this happening, that you budget for less number and you have more during the event. And so this surprise is sometimes difficult to manage. Is not sometimes, it's actually very difficult to manage. Where you have a very limited budget, you have to pay for their own transport, you have to pay for their feeding, you have to pay for their per diem, and your budget that is allocated for that is less. Sometimes some will tell you that no, they are just there for the entertainment or just to be part of the event. But I can assure you that most of them, when they start seeing that people are being given transport, it plays on their minds or their psychology, and you find that sometimes it's difficult. So it's always difficult, and then sometimes you the facilitator, you have to go into your own personal, which was originally planned.
Yeah,
so
if I can just jump
those
in.
are some of the surprises.
What did you do to manage such a situation, Akumbu?
So for the first two times we had this, to be frank with you, we just had to use our personal money. But for the next other event that we had to take time off to the community members, and we go to work. It was difficult, but we had to look for language and communicate our reality to them the best possible humane way that we can. So for us, that is the way we handled it, because we could not continue saying that we will remove money from our pockets and put it into the project when we don't even have. So it was just about communicating humanely to them our objective, and because it's true that we send information before coming to the community severally, but yet people will still come. So you have to look at a situation where you communicate to them in a very humane manner that, look, we need only 20, even though you are 25. Another thing that difficulty, which is very pertinent, is researcher artist. Sometimes it's difficult for an artist to understand the mind of the researcher. And most times also it's difficult for the researcher to understand the mindset. Yes, please.
Okay, sorry to jump in. So we have exhausted our time for this discussion, and we had more time to continue with the discussion in our Akumbu, you can continue, and when you do finish, we'll give the floor to other participants to throw in their comments and we discuss together. I think that works. Hi, Constance, did you want to say something?
Yes, I just had a question for Akumbu or maybe Penka, and I'll be using an example. This is in regards to challenges that storytelling they might face in the field when carrying out an intervention in storytelling. Okay, like in the case of SGB, for example, you go to the field and you're acting out a story on maybe a perpetrator of any form of violence or on somebody, and maybe a community member takes it personal and conflict arises. How do you deal with that situation? How do you manage conflict? I'm just using an example.
Thank you, Constance. Penka or Akumbu, do you want to jump on that question?
Sorry, Nine, I think I had some internet issues, so I don't know. I didn't get the question quite well.
Okay, do you want to repeat yourself, Constance?
Yes, Sophie, I was asking that, okay, maybe you get into a community and you are doing an intervention, storytelling, and conflict arises. How do you deal with conflict? So I was using an example, you're doing an intervention on SGBV and you're carrying out a story, and maybe this story is around perpetrators of violence to community members, and maybe a perpetrator is present during your presentation and takes your presentation personal, and then conflict arises. How do you manage that situation?
Yeah. Wow, that's a pertinent question. But what I want to make us understand is that the way we make the storytelling, that's actually one reason why we use storytelling. Because science is it's been proven that science have a raw way to put out the research evidence there that at times even frustrate perpetrators. I don't know. Yeah. So what we do is storytelling kind of like look at it as an entertainment first. That is the thing why people are getting entertained, the message is being passed on. And personally, I haven't had any experience where you use storytelling as an entertainment and someone feels so much people feel concerned, but I don't think a perpetrator might want to attack you. So storytelling is kind of like generalized. So when you're telling your stories, most often it's really generalized. It's very difficult. And thank you for raising that point. I think even though I haven't experienced that yet, it's possibility that something like this happens. So I think it's open to everyone to see how that can be tackled, because I personally I haven't had that experience. So thank you so much, Constance, for bringing that up.
Thank you, Penka. Akumbo, do you want to also share?
So again, it has to be contextual. So the first thing is that there are some topical issues in different communities that people are very passionate about. What Constant is asking is about gender-based violence. So it is not all about gender-based violence. So there's gender-based violence, there is political issues, and then of course there's religious beliefs. These three issues, my experience is that they always arise with a lot of conflict with community members. So it's especially in the community. For instance, if you go to a community where people are very passionate about their religion and they start talking about condom, that already creates a problem. Science says condom is good for you, but then the community members don't see it that way. That's a problem. Gender-based violence. In some communities, they will tell you that, look, it is our culture for the woman to do this, to do that, and you're telling me that women are supposed to be doing that. That is a serious issue for the community members. So sometimes it's always important. That's why I said that sometimes is a very tricky thing. But what I know we have done in the past is that it's always important to also work with community leaders. When to help to solve that issue of conflict, it's good to come with community leaders. In this case, when I talk about community leaders, I'm not talking all about like political leaders. I'm talking about opinion leaders who are influential in that community and who can navigate the conversation as it's ongoing. Take for instance, you're talking about a case of gender-based violence and you're in the community, so you can go in with, say, a woman pastor, for instance. Her presence there will help to soften the atmosphere and help the community to get engaged because they only look up to her as some leader. For instance, if you're going to a community and the issue is some sort of controversial, let's say, for instance, I am going to I'm going to Boyo and I'm going to be talking about condom. You may want to go not only with the actors and the researchers, but you also want to go with a medical practitioner. You may want to go with the school principal, for instance, who is very much informed about condom use, for instance. So in other words, it's to navigate the issue of conflict, it's always important not only to go with the actor, researcher, or the storyteller, or the theater practitioner and the researcher, but also take along some community leaders to be involved in the process. Because when some conflict arises, those are the people that you can rely on to mitigate the conflict. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think that's a very complex situation to handle if you do a presentation and that brings conflict. Thank you very much for that question, Constance. So does any other person have any comment to make on or question to ask on budgeting?
I have a question as well. So from my understanding, theater of the oppressed is done in collaboration with the community. So in this type of situation, if we're like the situation of a potential conflict because of a sensitive topic, would it not be done in partnership with the community members rather than bringing them after? Because maybe I didn't understand your response well, because my understanding of your response is that the actors and the researchers do basically create the content and now involve community leaders after. So given the process of how was in theater of the oppressed work, will they not instead be working together to figure out what's the best way to do it?
Maybe, can I respond?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So maybe maybe it was not clearer, but this is what I'm saying. Theater of the oppressed, the center is a community, not the researcher, not the artist. The center is a community. Like I said, it is a community that acts. The actor is just there to facilitate the process, but the main actors in the process are the community members. So you don't have professional actors. You can have one or two professional actors, or you can have one or two artists, but the main actors are the community members. You get? So it's so yes, to answer your question, rather, it is the community that sit with themselves. So the actors and the researchers are like how do I say it? They are like midwives. They are only guiding the child to come out. They are not the child. There's something that the community is pregnant with, and their work there is just to make sure that that thing comes out. They don't impose anything on the community. It is the community that decides and make decisions for themselves. Yes.
Oh, okay, thank you. That makes sense.
Thank you, Akumbu. So my understanding is that if we're doing the theater of the oppressed, we'll be able to detect if the conflict will arise or working in collaboration with the community, and it will be easy to sort this from the very beginning.
Yes, exactly.
I have a question here. Mr. Kumbo, you said that the actors are there just to guide, like the midwives, for the child to be born. Now, if the idea, do you go there with a preconceived idea in your mind, or you go and get the community to tell you the outcome of what you want to do?
So yes, with theater of the oppressed, you don't go there with any conceived idea. You're kind of research. So you don't go there with a preconceived idea about what is going to happen. You are there to gather data. Your story ends in a conflict so that you can help you to ask questions that will help you get data. That's what you are trying to do. You are not there to give them the end conclusion. You are there to stimulate a conversation, and then this conversation will help you to understand the community. It will help you to know what is the issue or what are the issues within that community. So the process of the research starts with that conflict, where you are able to now start gathering data from the people. Exactly.
So your hypothesis is run on the ground when you are at the community. You don't go to that community with a hypothesis. Okay, maybe Penka can answer this question for us. This worry that I have, Penka, following what Akumo has said, that the people in the community decide the results, and then they give you and you go and work on it, the researcher. Does this mean the researcher goes into the community with no hypothesis? You just go there and you form your hypothesis on the ground? and work with that to come out with a result or a finding?
Sorry, I think there might be some misunderstanding here, because I think Akumbu, he's actually like into it. You understand? He's actually like into it, and he's able to differentiate the different genre of arts. So, but I think generally what we mean by working with artists, researchers, and artists coming together, the main idea is communicating the research evidence, which means there is no hypothesis. The researchers have found something, they want to communicate it, so they have to use storytellers to communicate it. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think the issue was Akumo was trying to differentiate the different genre of theater. So I don't know, which I am not versed with.
All right, thank you.
Did any other person have any comment? So I just have another question here. What do you want to share some steps to consider when working with storytellers in the community that you're working with? Are there some steps that you need to follow? Do you want to share that with us? Either Akumbu or Penka can jump into that question.
I think to answer that, the first thing is that most of the research that has, or most of the projects, sorry, that have to do with research is from the perspective of the researcher, not from the artist. So rather, it is always the researcher that give the requirements of how the project is going to carry out. So take for instance that if I'm working with Ebase, they will give us a requirement of what they are looking for. If we are working with another research institute, they will tell us exactly what they are looking for. But in all of this, there are some generalities. So you want to have artists who can understand the basis of the data that has been given to them for translation. Because sometimes it's to communicate, like Sophie was saying, to translate or to communicate research findings is very difficult. The language itself is too scientific for the artist's mind. So that process of communication needs a researcher that can actually communicate in a less scientific way, where the artist can fully understand. I think this is one of the difficulties we had with Ebase some years back, because it was difficult for the artist to understand what is it that they are looking for, what is it that the researchers are looking for. You know, the inspiration an artist has might not come from where the researcher is looking at it. The researcher might be looking at malaria, but an artist is focusing more on, say, issues of love in a story. But what the researcher is looking for is, how do you have children under 5 uptake of drug, for instance? And then in the story, there's somebody who was in love or something like that. The artist might be focusing on that, when the real issue is uptake of drug, or how do you take care of children with or mosquito net, for instance. So it is always important to make sure that you have researchers that can fully communicate these research findings in a language that an artist can understand. And I think Ebase has successful now, because now they have an artist who is a researcher, or a researcher that's an artist. It is always important to have this duality, to have somebody who is both a researcher and an artist. And in Liberté now, we have learned in the past that just to have pure artist or pure researcher is not going to work. So now in Liberté, we also have a head of research who is also an artist. The duality of this will help now to make sure that the communication is fluent. I think this is the most important issue when considering how to get artists involved.
Thank you very much for that, Akubu. I think you have elaborated because, like we said from the beginning, that communicating such evidence is very complex, and sometimes the researcher might be to a storyteller and the artist, and they are not understanding the message that the researcher wants to be transmitted to the audience, and then there is that conflict. So thank you very much. Anyone have any more comments? Okay, if we don't have any more comments, I think we are already wrapping up. Today is our last day, and those who have been here for the past days, they are already used to when we are wrapping up sessions, we share the links for evaluation, and we also have a Google Doc Google link where we share photos. You can take a selfie of where you're attending from. You could snap maybe what you were eating or where you are during the institute and share with us through the Google link, which we are going to share in the chat. And also we have been winning points. So when you share your picture, you add alternate text to it. Alternate text is just to help describe the picture so that someone who was using screen reader or who has challenges reading and is using an assistive device will be able to also understand what you're sharing in the picture. So in the next few minutes, I'm just going to ask Leslie to share the links in the chat for our evaluation and the links to share the Google pictures.